twice now we've counted down the greatest accidents in history. The moldy plate, the scrap heap, the barrel they threw away. And every time, the same thing happens. Somebody sets out to find one thing and trips over something far better.
What's remarkable isn't the luck. Luck is everywhere. It rains down on all of us, constantly. What's rare is the person who stops, who looks at the mess on the bench and thinks, hang on.
So for our last countdown, at least for a while, here are 10 more. A fruit that spent 200 years wrongly accused of murder. A city that everybody dug straight through. And a sealed tunnel under a pyramid, full of liquid mercury that we only found because it rained. This is Accidental Discoveries, Volume 3. We start with something that is, almost certainly, in your kitchen right now. The tomato arrives in Europe in the 1500s, and Europe takes one look at it and decides it is death on a stem.
And you can see why. It belongs to the nightshade family. Its cousins include mandrake and deadly nightshade itself. The leaves smell rank. The fruit is suspiciously, indecently beautiful. Guilt by association.
So for the better part of 200 years, Europeans grew tomatoes as ornaments. A pretty curiosity for the flower bed. The love apple. Admired, painted, never eaten.
And when the wealthy finally did work up the nerve to eat one, they got sick. Some of them died, which rather seemed to settle the matter. Except the tomato wasn't killing them. Their plates were.
The rich ate off fine pewter, which was heavy with lead. And the tomato is unusually acidic. Acidic enough to pull that lead straight out of the plate and into the meal.
Meanwhile, in the south of Italy, the poor, who couldn't afford pewter and ate off wood and clay, had been eating tomatoes happily for generations, and were, quietly, inventing the food the entire world now queues up for.
Historians still argue about how much of the blame the pewter really deserves. But the shape of the story holds. A fruit spent 2 centuries condemned as a murderer, while the actual killer sat underneath the dinner.
Which brings us to a man who failed at absolutely everything he set out to do.
1860s, New York. An inventor named Thomas Adams takes a meeting with an exiled Mexican general. And not just any general. Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna, the man from the Alamo. Santa Anna is broke, living on Staten Island, and dreaming of buying his way back to power. His plan? A ton of chicle, a chewy latex from Mexican trees, which he's certain can be turned into cheap rubber.
Adams tries. For years. Toys, rain boots, bicycle tires. Every single attempt fails.
Beaten, he stands in a shop about to dump the whole ton of the useless stuff into the East River, when he watches a little girl buy a piece of cheap paraffin wax chewing gum.
And Adams remembers something. The general chewed his chicle, so Adams stops trying to make rubber and makes gum instead. Softer, smoother, and better than anything on the market. Santa Anna never got his army, but his failed rubber deal is, quite literally, still stuck to the bottom of your shoe.
The 8th of November, 1895. A German physicist, Wilhelm Röntgen, is working in a darkened lab with a cathode ray tube, a glass tube he has carefully wrapped in thick black cardboard so that not a single flicker of light can escape it.
And then, out of the corner of his eye, he sees it. A small coated screen on a bench, meters away, is shimmering, glowing faintly in the dark. Something is passing straight through the cardboard, through the air, through, as it will turn out, almost everything.
Röntgen is so unnerved that he works in secret for 7 weeks, barely leaving the laboratory. He thinks he might be going mad.
Then he asks his wife, Anna Bertha, to place her hand in front of a photographic plate.
And she sees her own skeleton. Her bones, her wedding ring, floating on a finger of shadow. She is said to have whispered, "I have seen my death."
She had, in fact, seen the X-ray and the first Nobel Prize in physics.
1903, Paris. A chemist named Edouard Benedictus knocks a glass flask off a high shelf. It hits the stone floor, and it doesn't shatter. It cracks, a spider's web of fractures, but it holds its shape. Every shard stays exactly where it is.
The flask had once held collodion, which had dried to an invisible film on the inside of the glass, and that film was holding the broken pieces together.
Benedictus puts the flask on a shelf and thinks little more of it, until he reads a newspaper report about young women being killed in the new motor cars by flying glass from their windscreens.
He worked through the night, and by morning he had invented laminated safety glass. It is in the windscreen of nearly every car on Earth, and it exists because a clumsy man dropped a dirty flask, and crucially, because he remembered it when it mattered.
September 1966, Gyeongju in South Korea. Thieves come in the night for the great stone pagoda of Seokatap at the Bulguksa Temple. They are after the treasures sealed inside it. They fail, but they damage the pagoda badly enough that it has to be taken apart and repaired.
And when the restorers open it up, they find something the robbers never knew was there. A scroll of mulberry paper, over 6 meters long. It is the Great Dharani Sutra, a Buddhist text printed from carved wood blocks and sealed inside that pagoda around the year 751.
Which makes it the oldest surviving printed document on Earth. Printed 7 centuries before Gutenberg was even born.
It had sat untouched in the dark for 1,200 years, and we only have it because somebody tried to steal it.
1599. An Italian architect, Domenico Fontana, is digging a water channel across the countryside near Naples. His workmen cut clean through some buried walls. Painted walls, frescoes, inscriptions. Fontana writes it down and carries on digging. They cover it back up.
They had tunneled straight through Pompeii, a Roman city buried by Vesuvius, frozen mid-morning with its bread still in the ovens. And nobody realized. It took another 150 years before anyone dug there on purpose, and even then, it was 15 more before an inscription finally told them the name of the place they'd found.
For a century and a half, the greatest archaeological site in Europe sat under a ditch that people had already walked past.
Some accidents are quieter than that. Some of them are sitting on your ceiling.
The 1930s. A Swiss physicist, Walter Jaeger, is trying to build a sensor that can detect poison gas, the great terror of his generation. The idea is elegant, the device is well built, and it does not work. He releases the gas. The needle doesn't so much as twitch.
So Jaeger does what a frustrated man in the 1930s does. He sits back and lights a cigarette.
The needle jumped.
His machine was completely blind to poison gas, but the tiny particles in his cigarette smoke disturbed the ionized air inside it perfectly. He had failed to build a gas detector and accidentally built the smoke detector, which now sits on the ceiling above you and saves thousands of lives every year.
1952, Sweden. A young doctor, Per-Ingvar Brånemark, is studying how blood flows through healing bone. To watch it, he screws a tiny optical chamber into the leg bone of a rabbit. A little window, made of titanium, purely because titanium happened to be what he had.
Months later, the study ends, and he goes to take his expensive little windows back out. He can't. The bone has grown into the metal. They have become one thing.
Living bone, it turns out, doesn't reject titanium. It welcomes it.
Brånemark called it osseointegration and abandoned the research he'd spent years on to chase it. The dental establishment decided he was a crank and told him so for the better part of a decade.
In 1965, he anchored titanium implants into the jaw of a man named Gösta Larsson, who hadn't been able to eat properly in years. They held for the rest of his life. Over 40 years.
Every dental implant, every titanium hip, every anchored prosthetic limb in the world today, all of it began with a rabbit and a window a man could not remove.
Which leaves us with the strangest of the lot. 1669, Hamburg. An alchemist named Hennig Brand is chasing the great obsession of his age, the philosopher's stone, the magic substance that turns cheap metal into gold.
And Brand has a theory about where to find it. Gold is yellow. And what else, he reasons, is yellow and comes out of a living human being.
So he collects urine, buckets of it. By some accounts, more than 1,000 gallons, boiled down for weeks in his cellar into a black tar.
There was, of course, no gold, but when he roasted that residue with sand and charcoal, a white vapor rose, condensed, and glowed, a cold, eerie light, burning in the dark for hours.
He named it Phosphorus, the light bearer.
Hennig Brand was hunting gold. Instead, he became the first human being in recorded history to discover a chemical element.
October 2003. Days of torrential rain are falling on the ancient city of Teotihuacán in Mexico. And at the foot of the Temple of the Feathered Serpent, the sodden ground gives way, opening a hole about a meter across that nobody has ever seen before. An archaeologist, Sergio Gomez, ties a rope around his waist and has his colleagues lower him into the dark.
Beneath him is a tunnel, deliberately sealed and untouched for roughly 1,800 years. It runs 100 meters deep under the pyramid. The walls and the ceiling are studded with pyrite, fool's gold, which in torchlight glitters like a sky full of stars. There are miniature carved mountains, and at the far end, pools of liquid mercury lying still and bright like a river in the underworld.
They built an entire cosmos down there in the dark and then sealed the door. We still don't know why, and we only found it because it rained.
30 accidents over 3 volumes. And here, finally, is what they have in common. Not one of these people was lucky. Or rather, they were no luckier than anyone else.
Fleming wasn't the only scientist with a messy bench. Brand wasn't the only fool boiling something strange in a cellar. Thousands of people dropped a flask. Thousands walked past a hole in the ground.
The difference is that one of them stopped and looked again and refused to file it away as a failure.
The universe is not stingy with clues. It scatters them at our feet, constantly, generously, all day long. It simply doesn't tell you which ones matter.
So pay attention to the mess, the thing that went wrong, the result you weren't looking for. That is where every good thing has always come from.
I'm Atlas.
And I'm Professor Faraday.
And that's the end of Accidental Discoveries. For now. We'll be back with more when we've found them. Until then, go and be the most interesting person in the room.